as Genghis Shakhan. I am the managing attorney at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. I am happy to speak with you today. We have another great video for you lined up. This one is going to be about the best interest of the child standard. So, if you have children, you're going through a divorce, child custody fight, you're going through legitimation, or you might have something going on with contempt. If children are involved and custody is in dispute, more than likely this is a standard that you as well as the court is going to be grappling with. So it behooves you to get a little familiar with this standard here in the state of Georgia. Okay. So before we get started, again, my name is Genghis Shakhan. I'm the managing attorney at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. We are a boutique law firm and we are small on purpose, right? So we believe in having a small organization so that we can engage our clients. We get to know them, get to know their cases, and it helps us really move things along when it comes to really making certain that our clients' legal goals are met. Okay. Of course, at different firms, much larger firms, folks are, fine with being a number. That is not the situation at Chicano and Wilkerson Law Firm. We pride ourselves on really having a family forward and family oriented organization. Okay. It's just a little bit about us, a quick plug. Okay. Well, before we get started, let me go ahead and give you this disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. By watching this video and engaging with this video, this does not constitute an attorney client relationship between yourself and the law firm of Chacon and Wilkerson. Okay. So bear that in mind. All right. Now that we've gotten all of the formalities out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. All right. So, the best interest of the child standard. We're going to do a quick roadmap. We're going to talk about everything that judges consider because this is something that judges are going to consider. It's not something that would go to a jury when it comes to deciding custody. This is judge specific, okay? And so judges consider this standard, and there's a lot that goes into the standard. There are some things that we'll discuss that are going to be perhaps more concrete. Other things are going to be a bit vague or gray, and you'll kind of see what I mean as we begin getting into and doing a deep dive into this topic. So, again, thank you for joining us. If you have joined us for other videos, of course, we do everything criminal, everything family, divorce, child custody related, men's rights related. So, make sure that you visit the other videos in our library. Make certain this is helpful. Make certain that you like the video. If you know that someone is going through something regarding children and dispute with custody, make sure you do them a solid and forward this video along to them because the content might be helpful. Don't hoard it to yourself, guys. I know it's a great value, and it's a very valuable asset to have a little arrow in your quiver when it comes to knowing about the law. But this is a resource. It's intended to be a free resource. So make certain that your friends, family, if they're going through something similar to this, make sure they have access. And as always, if you need a lawyer, you have two options. You can give us a call at 404-999-9529 or 845-1213. You could hit the link in our bio, and that can also take you to where you can get signed up for a consultation, a free consultation, that is. Okay. All right. That being said, let's go ahead and do a deep dive. So, the best interest of the child standard is what we're discussing today. Let's talk a little bit about what the best interest of the child standard means. It doesn't mean what's best for dad. It doesn't mean what's best for mom. Okay. It's pretty simple. It means what's in the best interest of the child or in the best interest of the children, plural. Okay. So it means the child's health, the child's welfare, obviously, their safety, their happiness, their emotional well being, their stability, and again, back to their overall welfare. That is what best interest of the child means. That is what they are driving at when they say best interest of the child. So the judge looks at the big picture, okay, not the small picture through a very small lens, the big picture, okay. And so sometimes clients and parents have a difficult time with that because they don't, sometimes because they are engaged in this mortal combat between themselves, it gets really challenging to think about what is going to be best for the child, not necessarily best for themselves. They are a little biased, all right? And so that's why you have an impartial party like a judge that is going to sit in and referee this thing and make a final determination, okay? So just understanding the way custody works, if you're in a custody fight, there's I would say I'm going to say in family law, there really are no winners and losers. Don't say that to our clients, so right. However, a child is going to be most well-rounded, having access to both parents. I think deep down at our core, the children inside of us might feel very similarly. All right. And I know I feel similarly that, having access to mom and dad, to those resources that come with mom and dad, is going to create a well balanced young person. Of course, there's always exceptions, there's always outliers. I'm not going to get into those because there are many. Okay. However, generally speaking, okay, and I think you follow me, that is the best condition for a child to be raised in. It took those two parties to make the child, right? And if we're not talking about, if we're talking about even in same-sex marriages and same-sex relationships, having their two parties is better than one. I think we can hopefully, for the most part, all agree on that. All right. So, what is a judge going to look like? I'm going to step off of my soapbox. What are they looking for when it comes to determining what is going to be in the best interest of this child, whose destiny is in their hands, right? And they're going to use evidence, they're going to use witness statements. They're going to maybe talk with the parents. And then they're going to consider the child's needs. That is going to be how the judge is going to make that determination. Okay. So, in a nutshell, everything matters. Okay. And so, this is what a judge is doing when they are thinking about and contemplating what the best interest of the child, what that means. Okay. And so, here are some other common factors that judges consider. It's not all the factors judges consider. Here are some of the factors that judges consider. They're thinking about the parent-child relationship. That's a big one. Okay, so who is going to be or who has been, especially if you're in a situation where someone's trying to flip custody. Okay, they were the secondary parent. Now they're looking to be the primary. The judge is going to look at those parent-child relationships. So if you have been the primary custodian, how has the child fared under your parentage, right? So that's something that a judge is going to look at. And so, do you attend school events? Okay, doctor's appointments, the daily routines. What do the daily routines look like with you, right? Are meals being prepared? Is homework being reviewed? Right? That's pretty important of how you are engaging, how you are rearing the child. Okay, your ability to parent, right? So some folks, they are better at parenting than others. And what comes with that? Again, keeping stable housing, stable employment, good judgment. Do you have sound judgment when it comes to parenting and ability to meet a child's needs? Okay, so if one parent is stable, and they have resources, that looks great, as opposed to if there's another parent that is unstable, they are transient, they are always on the move, their situation seems chaotic. A judge is not going to like instability for children. Okay, it creates problems, right? And so, judges are going to prefer a more stable environment as opposed to an unstable one. So keep that in mind. Then there are, of course, things like the emotional bond, right? So your bond with the child, okay? If you're a primary, you may already be heads and shoulders of the secondary parent when it comes to having that emotional bond, okay? Simply because, you are the parent that the child spends the majority of the time with, okay? And has the most face time with. So that nod might go to you, but it depends. Okay, so that's something the judge is going to take into consideration, as well as the physical and mental health of a child. All right, so if there are any health concerns, And a judge is going to want to know if they are going to actually impact your parenting. Okay, so for example, if your child is autistic, all right, sometimes that's a big thing. If your child is on certain medications, do you know how to administer those medications? Right? Do you know? Is it because if it's a lethal combination of medications that are put together, and your child gets this nasty cocktail of medications because you're not really sure on the timing or the dosage of medications, that might be problematic. And the judge may take issue with that, and might decide to go in a different direction when it comes to awarding custody if you don't know how to essentially administer medication to your child if your child is in need of daily medication, right? And a bad dosage can have bad effects on your child, all right? Can prove lethal. So that could be an issue, all right? And we talked about stability. We talked a little bit about, for example, are you remaining in the same home, right? So if you are moving from place to place, if you're in a homeless shelter, going from a shelter maybe to an apartment, or an apartment to maybe a hotel room, that instability is going to be problematic with the judge. Okay, as opposed to someone who is not renting, perhaps, that owns their home, has enough square footage in their home. A child may have their own bedroom in that home. They may have set times where they're doing homework, doing chores. That kind of stability obviously bodes well for the party that is creating that stable environment for a child. So in terms of a judge looking at these two situations, one that is more stable and one is unstable, again, thinking back to, you got to put yourself in the mindset of a judge. What is going to be in the best interest of this child? The judge is going to prefer stability. Okay, so something to keep in mind. All right, and consistency, that's another thing the judge is looking at. So routines, I should say that as well. So again, I talked about chores, I talked about homework. If a child is late to school routinely, that's going to impact, of course, their grades. That is going to, again, impact how the judge perceives you as a sound parent, right? That can create this stable environment. So, something else to be mindful of. Another is cooperation, right? If the parents are not cooperating, if you are the party responsible for all the angst and all the anxiety, and really all the combativeness in the relationship at drop-offs and pickups, if you're engaging in parental alienation, that's going to be problematic as well. Okay, if you're not working together, you're not communicating together, all right, and if you're discouraging the child having a relationship with that other parent, right? You're disobeying court orders. That is going to be a strike against you, all right, and that's going to harm your interest when it comes to winning primary custody, if that's something that you're interested in. And I'm going to put winning in quotation marks because you know my mindset when it comes to family law. Okay. All right. Another thing a judge might take into consideration, if it has been an issue in the past, are issues of family violence. Okay. So sometimes, these cases can end up in being investigated by defects, can end up in the juvenile court. And sometimes there might have been TPOs, or temporary protective orders, that have been issued, protective orders, subsequent protective orders. All of that is going to impact how a judge perceives, again, whether or not you are going to be the superior parent. And I'm saying superior because usually in these custody fights, they are a zero sum game. And what I mean by that is someone is going to prevail and someone is not. Okay, there's going to be a primary usually and a secondary. Unless you guys contract for something different, most judges are not going to award joint physical custody. Not saying it doesn't happen, but for the most part, it's just not something that routinely happens in the courts, right? I've seen it happen. Oftentimes, when I have seen it happen, it is because the parents are amicable. They get along very well. They live relatively close to one another, and they have contracted for joint physical custody, which usually looks like 1 week on, 1 week off, right? And they may get along like the best of friends, because those are a lot of drop offs and exchanges. Okay. And if you're not getting along, you're essentially seeing someone, what, about 52 weeks out of the year, someone that you might have gotten a divorce from and you hate their guts. Okay. And so that might make drop off and pickups miserable, especially if you or the other party decides to get a different romantic partner and you may not get along with that person. So that's something else that you do want to be mindful of. Okay. But we talked about if there are issues of family violence, domestic abuse, any kind of abuse, child abuse, neglect, or protective orders. I mentioned protective orders. Okay. That can be a problem. Same thing with substance abuse. Okay. There are issues of substance abuse. There's allegations of substance abuse, drug use, alcohol use, or any kind of addictions that might impact your custody, along with criminal history. Okay, if there is, depending on the nature of the offense, when it occurred, the impact on the child. So if you've been accused of things like child abuse or child neglect, those things are going to impact how a judge receives you as a parent, and considering the best interest of the child standard, whether or not they're going to feel that you are a good fit for being the primary. Not only that, but even exercising visitation at all. They may decide, a judge may decide that your visitation needs to be supervised, okay? Or that your visitation just needs to be during, maybe the daytime, for a certain amount of time in a public place. I've seen that as well, right? Because the judges had concerns about a parent and their ability to parent, okay? And parent unsupervised. So there might not be overnights. You might not be permitted to keep the child overnight, okay? All of that is in the judge's power. And the judge is again considering all of those things that I've just mentioned when it comes to the best interest of the child standard. The other thing is a child's school performance, and I mentioned this already, what those grades look like, okay? That's something that, we use as evidence in the courts all the time. If your child is in elementary school and they're being held back, that does not bode very well for you, okay? Judges are going to be extremely concerned about why your child has been retained in a grade because of, they're not meeting the academic standards of the school. Okay, they're going to wonder what's going on with the parenting situation, and if that has happened on your watch, that can be a major concern, especially if the other parent brings that up as an issue on why the child custody needs to be modified. We have used that to get modifications, and I'm going to tell you that's pretty strong evidence to bring forward. And I've seen judges really mull over the idea of modifying custody just based off of those school records, right? They can skip past everything else and say, hey, this child has been retained in kindergarten, or this child has been set back in third grade, right? Because of they're not meeting the academic standards. That's a big concern, right? Because obviously, if there are early problems in school, it's just a bad recipe for what later on might look like. And then, of course, you start talking about not just academic woes, but sometimes with that comes, the disciplinary stuff a little bit later on. So huge concern for judges. Another one is going to be the child's medical needs, and I kind of touched on this briefly. Who is managing, the doctor's visits, dentist visits, therapy, medication? And so if you are ignoring, another big one is if you are ignoring the child's medical needs, that can be a problem. We've seen folks who have ignored their child's dental needs, where children have had teeth pulled, rotten teeth pulled out of their mouths as very young children. Okay, that might be akin to negligence. Okay, and a judge is going to have questions, and your custody is going to swing in the balance. And so we have used that. If there have been medical needs that have been neglected, if there have been school issues, we that's something that we have used. This is not just from textbooks. This is something that we have actually used as evidence and brought forward in seeking custody modifications for our clients. Okay, school activities, who are supporting sports, church, certain clubs, 4-H clubs, Boy Scout, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, hobbies, all of that. If there's one parent that is really behind that and pushing that, that the kid be active, engaged in their community, engaged in being a young person that is moral, and essentially follows the rules, a judge is going to like that, and that's going to bode very well for that particular parent. All right. So another question that we generally get when it comes to discussing the best interest of the child is, can a child decide where they would like to live? I'm going to give you the typical lawyer answer. If you've been following us for a while, you know what that answer is. It depends. Okay. So if a child is 14 years old, they can complete an election, what's called an election affidavit. So they can say to the court, hey, I would love to live with this parent, right? However, it doesn't control. What does control is, guess what? The judge can always veto whatever the child elects, if the judge feels it's not in the best interest of the child. So there's always these checks and balances, like an executive branch, like with Congress, there are checks and balances. Okay. So, yes, a child 14 years or older can make an election. However, a judge can veto it if the judge feels like it's not in the child's best interest. Okay. Keep that in mind. Now, if a child is 13 or 12 years old, same deal. A judge might consider the child's election. However, it doesn't control at all, and of course, it's still going to be decided by the best interest of the child, irregardless of what the young person wants or is hoping to have happen when it comes to living with one parent over the other. Let's just be honest. Sometimes kids are fickle. They don't necessarily know what is in their best interest, and that's one of the reasons why the judge will, of course, lean on their own understanding of the situation, consider the totality of circumstances, and then make a decision based on everything that they have heard regarding testimony and evidence about what's going to be in that minor child's best interest. So the judge, just keep in mind, the judge is always going to be the final decision maker. And now sometimes judges will bring children into the court. Most of the times they will not. I believe personally that children should not be a part of the judicial process. Of course, unless there are exceptions. I always want to, just like in the law, when it comes to the law, if you're familiar with it, there are always exceptions, and there are some exceptions. I do believe that children should get involved. However, when it comes to their parents fighting and having to take sides, I just don't believe that it is in their psychological or emotional best interest to do that in front of the parents, because I think it impacts the parents as much as it impacts the children. And it's heartbreaking to see, if you are sitting in a court, seeing it done. I have seen those situations, and it is rough and it's tough to ignore, some of the things that are said. Sometimes judges will bring those kids back in chambers and have a conversation with them away from the parties, in camera inspection, or in camera interview. And sometimes, a child might be called into the court, and the judge may have a conversation, sometimes even in front of the parents, right? And so just kind of keep that in mind. That's something that judges can do. Most of the judges I've seen that have brought young people in have done so back in chambers, away from the parents, and sometimes occasionally even away from the attorneys. Okay. All right. So here are some things that can harm your custody case. All right. Bad mouthing the other parent, engaging in parental alienation, refusing visitation, violating court orders, domestic violence, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, posting inappropriate things on social media. See a lot of that. We that social media is a case killer. If you have a case, stay off of social media, guys. And then failing to co-parent, those things kill cases pretty quickly. And so here's some of the things that can actually help your case. Being involved, being consistent, keeping good records, putting your child first, all right? Following court orders, encouraging the child's relationship with that other parent, and then staying. Notice I said other parent, right? Because sometimes it's like that, right? It's like that might have been your former spouse, but once you guys get a divorce, it's like that other parent, right? The co-parent, right? They all of a sudden they don't have a name. I've been there. I understand, right? We are on one accord. Trust me. And then staying calm and respectful. That's really important as well. So the evidence that the judges consider, we've covered this, guys, already. School records, medical records, text messages, emails, photos, videos, testimony, police reports, defects records, guardian ad litem reports, custody evaluations, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And so if you have an attorney, they will again hopefully know what to present in terms of evidence, because there is a finite amount of time to present a case, right? You can't get up there and just have a dissertation and go on and on and on. A judge is going to want you to get to the bottom of it, right? And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to have counsel, because usually counsel knows legally what needs to be put forward so that you can prevail, all right? And they don't just throw everything they got at it, right? The kitchen sink at it. That is not going to work for you. All right, now let's talk about really quickly as we begin wrapping up some common myths regarding child custody. Some are that mothers automatically get custody. That is a myth. That does not happen. It's the same with fathers never get custody. I have seen fathers in court get custody, and I've seen mothers lose custody. Okay, now I won't pretend that mothers aren't awarded custody more than fathers, because that is absolutely a thing. Some states are more mother friendly than father friendly as well. However, it can happen, and it just depends on the facts. But usually, one of the reasons why we're retained is because one of our practice areas for men is men's rights. And so again, we believe that both parents should have access, should have equal parenting time when it comes to raising children, right? That's just the best way to raise well-rounded children. That is our philosophy. That is what we believe in, Chelsea and I. And so it's important that, when it comes to these custody fights, that, you kind of bear that in mind, is something that the government believes, right? They believe that child needs both parents. That's one of the reasons why they have proceedings like this, so that at least there's going to be a primary, and there's going to be a secondary that's going to be awarded visitation, right? It's not going to be 50-50, but both parents will have opportunities to raise that young person or young persons. Okay. Another common misconception is the person with the most money usually wins custody, and that's not true. Or that children get to decide where they'd like to go, and that's not true either. Okay, so the again the what we discussed today was why basically we talked a little bit about the best interest of the child standard, why judges think about the best interest of the child standard when it comes to what parent is going to be assigned the primary as opposed to the secondary. All right, guys. As always, if you have a child custody case, you're attempting to modify it, you're going through a divorce, you may be going through a legitimation or some kind of contempt action. And if we can help you out, if you need an attorney, you're looking to retain one, you can always give us a call at 478-845-1213, or you can give us a call at 404-999-9529. We'd be happy to assist you as always, or you can go into the link in our bio and schedule a consultation. If this has been helpful, remember to like, follow, hit that notification button so that you know when we're doing these videos, and you can be the first to review it. Again, we cover everything that's criminal defense as well as family law. Thank you guys for tuning in with us. We'll see you in the next video.